There's a quiet strength most people overlook because humility isn't about thinking less of yourself. It's about thinking of yourself less. Why does modern society often mistake humility for weakness when ancient wisdom reveals it as the foundation of real growth? Stoicism, practiced by emperors and slaves alike, offers a surprising roadmap for cultivating this misunderstood virtue. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king who ruled Rome at its height, wrote in his private journal, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." Not exactly the grand proclamation you'd expect from history's most powerful man. That's the paradox of Stoic humility. It's not self-deprecation, but liberation from the constant need to prove your worth. Today we'll explore how these 2,000-year-old teachings can help you replace ego-driven struggles with genuine self-improvement, starting with 3 practical exercises even the busiest person can apply. One of the biggest myths we carry today is the belief that we're supposed to control everything: our careers, relationships, even how others perceive us. But here's what the Stoics understood 2,000 years ago. The more you chase absolute control, the more life humbles you. Epictetus, born enslaved and later one of history's greatest philosophers, put it bluntly, "Some things are up to us and some things are not." That simple distinction, his famous dichotomy of control, cuts through the noise of modern anxiety. It's not about giving up, but about focusing your energy where it actually matters. Seneca took it further, writing to a friend, "Fate leads the willing and drags the unwilling." There's a quiet power in that surrender, not passive resignation, but the clarity to stop wrestling with forces beyond your influence. Think about the last time you stressed over a delayed flight, a rude comment, or a sudden change in plans. How much of that frustration came from insisting reality should bend to your expectations? The irony: humility grows fastest when we stop pretending we're the exception to life's unpredictability. A CEO who blames the market for unfair setbacks suffers just as much as a student who rages against a cancelled event. Both are fighting the same illusion that their willpower alone should override circumstance. So here's a challenge. Where in your life are you exhausting yourself trying to control the uncontrollable? Is it in someone else's opinion of you, the outcome of a risky venture, even the weather on your wedding day? The Stoic exercise isn't to abandon effort, it's to redirect it. Plant the seeds, but don't demand the sky rain exactly when you want it to. That shift from controller to participant is where humility begins to feel like relief. Imagine ending each day not with self-criticism, but with quiet curiosity, like holding up a mirror to your actions without flinching. Marcus Aurelius did this every night in his journal, writing lines like, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly." Notice what's missing. He never follows this with, "and they're terrible," or "but I'm better." Just observation, raw honesty without the drama of judgment. This is the Stoic art of prosaic attention turned inward, not to wallow in mistakes, but to spot patterns before they harden into habit. Ancient texts describe it as splitting the self in two. One part experiences life, the other watches like a neutral scientist. Seneca practiced it by asking himself at dusk, "What weakness did you master today? What vice went unchecked? No guilt, just data." Modern psychology backs this. Studies on metacognition, thinking about thinking, show that people who regularly self-reflect make better decisions and handle stress with more grace. The key: detachment. Write down, "I snapped at my coworker." Not to label yourself a bad person, but to ask, what triggered that? Hunger, fear of looking incompetent. That slight shift from verdict to investigation turns humility into fuel. Here's where most stumble. We confuse humility with humiliation, so we either ignore our flaws or attack ourselves for having them. The Stoics offered a third way: see yourself clearly, as if you were assessing a close friend. You wouldn't scream at them for a mistake, you'd ask how to fix it. Now try their evening ritual. Before bed, name one thing you'd rather ignore. Maybe you dominated a conversation today or pretended to know something you didn't. Just name it, no fix yet, that's tomorrow's work. Tonight, simply see. Think about the last time you scrolled through social media. How many posts made you feel like you were falling behind? That gnawing sense that others have more success, better relationships, shinier lives. Modern culture trains us to compare upward, measuring ourselves against unattainable ideals. But the Stoics practiced the opposite, comparing downward, not to pity others, but to shatter the illusion that we're lacking. Musonius Rufus, the teacher who shaped Epictetus' thinking, put it plainly. If you want to be content, look at those whose lives are harder than yours, not easier. This wasn't about guilt, but perspective. Ancient philosophers called it premeditatio malorum, imagining life without the comforts we barely notice: running water, a bed, the ability to walk, things we'd miss desperately if they vanished, yet rarely appreciate while they're here. Social media hijacks this natural reflex. Platforms thrive on envy, pushing us to crave what we don't have. But Stoic gratitude isn't passive, it's an active recalibration of vision. When Seneca wrote about dining on simple bread and water, he wasn't promoting austerity, he was testing his own freedom. Could I still be happy without luxury? That question dissolves entitlement. Try this tonight, pause before sleep and list 3 things you didn't lose today. Your health, a loved one's voice, a safe place to rest. Not grand abstractions, ordinary miracles you'd ache for if they were gone. The goal isn't to ignore ambition, but to anchor it in reality. Wanting more isn't the problem. Believing you need more to be happy is. Envy shrinks when gratitude expands. The Stoics knew you can't resent someone's bigger house while truly valuing your own warm meal. That shift doesn't weaken drive, it fuels it from a place of abundance, not scarcity. So next time comparison steals your peace, ask, what do I have that others would long for? The answers might surprise you. The Stoics didn't see wisdom as something you achieve, they saw it as something you practice, like a craft that never stops demanding your attention. Epictetus, who taught philosophy while still legally enslaved, compared life to a never-ending classroom. His students weren't just young scholars, they were politicians, merchants, even skeptics who came to argue. Yet he welcomed them all with the same challenge: if you think you've graduated, you've already failed. Seneca took it further in his letters. Writing to his friend Lucilius, he admitted, "I don't just study books, I study people." The rude stranger cutting in line, a lesson in patience. The colleague who dismisses your ideas, a test of conviction. Even enemies, he argued, reveal truths about ourselves we'd rather ignore. This wasn't about passive acceptance, but about mining every interaction for insight. Modern culture often treats humility as a weakness, a sign we've been proven wrong. But the Stoics flipped that script. To them, being wrong wasn't defeat, it was progress. Think of the last time someone challenged your beliefs. Maybe a friend questioned your political stance or a child asked why. To something you took for granted. Discomfort in those moments isn't a threat, it's the friction of growth. Some of history's greatest minds thrived on this principle. Benjamin Franklin kept a notebook titled Errors, where he recorded his mistakes not to dwell on them, but to track his evolution. Marie Curie, even after winning Nobel Prizes, referred to herself as a student of science. The common thread, treating expertise not as armor but as a starting point. So here's an experiment for one day. Approach every conversation, even frustrating ones, as if the other person has something to teach you. The barrister rushing your order, notice how impatience feels in your body. The online comment that irks you, ask what nerve it touches. Humility in this light isn't about shrinking. It's about expanding your capacity to learn from the unlikeliest tutors. After all, if even emperors like Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The obstacle becomes the way," who are we to assume we're above the lesson? Failure has a way of shrinking us unless we learn to see it as the Stoics did, not as proof of our inadequacy, but as the raw material for unshakable resilience. Consider Cato the Younger, the Roman senator who made failure his training ground. When political rivals mocked him publicly, he thanked them for the chance to practice composure. After losing an election, he spent the next morning playing ball in the forum, not to hide embarrassment, but to demonstrate that his worth wasn't tied to victory. To the Stoics, setbacks weren't deviations from the path, they were the path. Marcus Aurelius put it plainly in his Meditations: the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. That insight flips modern fragility on its head. Today, we're taught to avoid failure at all costs, curate perfect resumes, hide struggles, interpret every misstep as a threat to our identity. But ancient philosophy asks a radical question. What if the stumbles are the very things that strengthen your stride? Take breathing, for example. A newborn's lungs must collapse slightly during their first cries to fully expand. Without that initial failure of function, they'd never develop the capacity for deep breaths. Human growth follows the same paradox. We need resistance to build resilience. Modern culture often treats discomfort as a system error, but Stoicism reframes it as the operating system itself. Here's where journaling becomes a tool for transformation. Instead of replaying a recent failure with shame, "Why did I mess up?" ask Cato's question: "What did this teach me about patience, preparation, or pride?" Maybe a missed promotion revealed your blind spots, or a strained friendship showed where your communication falters. The lesson isn't in the fall, it's in how you recalibrate your footing afterward. Try this tonight. Write about one setback you've tried to forget, not to relive the pain, but to mine it for wisdom. Did rushing a project teach you about pacing? Did a harsh word spoken in anger reveal a trigger? The goal isn't self-flagellation, it's pattern recognition. Because humility isn't about denying your flaws, it's about letting them guide you towards something sturdier. The next time life knocks you down, remember, soil only becomes fertile after it's broken. Every great oak was once an acorn that refused to let the weight of the earth stop it from rising. There's a striking moment in Seneca's letters where he warns his friend Lucilius about a peculiar trap. The greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, the reliance on tomorrow while wasting today. But he wasn't just talking about procrastination. He was exposing the illusion of performative virtue, the habit of announcing our good intentions while delaying the actual work. In an age where social media turns even humility into a performance, the Stoics offer a counterintuitive truth. Real growth happens in the quiet. Consider the modern humble brag. The post that starts with "I'm so embarrassed" before detailing a promotion. The tweet complaining about too many requests to subtly signal demand. Seneca saw this coming 2,000 years ago. He wrote, "A man is as wretched as he has convinced himself to be, not because suffering isn't real, but because we often amplify our struggles to fish for admiration." Ancient philosophers called it kenodoxia, empty glory, the addiction to external validation that weakens genuine progress. Here's the litmus test when you help someone. Does it feel incomplete if no one notices? The Stoics practiced something radical: anonymous benevolence. Cato would walk the streets of Rome at night, secretly paying debts for strangers. Marcus Aurelius funded orphanages without attaching his name. Why? Because virtue untethered from applause hardens into true character. As Epictetus put it, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Not to reject praise when it comes, but to stop craving it as proof of worth. This week, try an experiment in quiet integrity. Do one thing, just one, that no one will ever credit you for. Pay for a stranger's coffee without revealing it was you. Leave a book you love on a park bench with a note inside. For whoever needs this today, don't document it. Don't hint at it, let the act stand alone. The paradox, the less you advertise your goodness, the more it becomes who you are, not a costume to wear for applause, but skin you live in. Seneca said it best, we suffer more in imagination than in reality. That includes the imagined audience we think we need to impress. Strip that away, and what remains is something unshakable. A self built not on likes, but on deeds that outlast the noise. Picture Earth suspended in the black vastness of space, a pale blue dot no larger than a speck of dust in an endless cosmos. This is the Stoic exercise called the view from above, and Marcus Aurelius practiced it daily. Think of the whole of existence, how infinitesimal your share of it. Not to diminish your worth, but to dissolve the illusion that your struggles are the center of the universe. 2,000 years before astronauts glimpsed our planet from orbit, Epictetus observed, "You cannot step into the same river twice." His words hold a double wisdom. First, that everything, including your worries, is in perpetual flux. But more crucially, the river doesn't pause because you're distressed. Stars burn, tides turn, and life moves relentlessly forward whether you're ready or not. There's a strange comfort in that truth. Try this next time stress grips you. Zoom out mentally. Imagine watching your situation from Saturn's rings. That argument with your partner, the missed deadline. From that distance, they're not trivial, but they are temporary. The same perspective that humbles human arrogance also softens our suffering. Ancient Stoics weren't suggesting we ignore real pain. They were teaching us to distinguish between what feels catastrophic and what truly is. The entrepreneur agonizing over a failed product launch might benefit from remembering, in 100 years no one will recall it, but the resilience built in its aftermath could shape generations. Marcus scribbled in his journal, "Think of the vast abyss of time before you were born and the infinite stretch after." That realization isn't meant to overwhelm, but to free you. The pressure to be perfect, to control every outcome, to leave an indelible mark. It all relaxes when you grasp your fleeting, precious place in the cosmic story. Here's the invitation. Step outside tonight. Look up. Let the stars remind you that humility isn't about shrinking, it's about expanding your vision until the noise of ego and anxiety fades into quiet awe. The universe has humbled kings and peasants alike for millennia. Why should you be the exception? The morning sun rises whether we notice it or not, yet how often do we pause to recognize the hands that prepared our breakfast, the roads that carried us safely, or even the challenges that forced us to grow stronger? Stoicism reframes gratitude not as a fleeting emotion, but as a deliberate practice that erodes entitlement brick by brick. Epictetus, who endured slavery before becoming philosophy's most famous teacher, began each day with an unconventional ritual. First, I give thanks that I am awake, that I am alive, and then I give thanks even for those who oppose me. He wasn't praising cruelty, he was training himself to see friction as fuel. Modern psychology reveals something fascinating. People who journal gratitude for just 5 minutes a day show measurable increases in resilience. But the Stoics took this further. Their journals weren't just lists of blessings. They were exercises in tracing interdependence. Marcus Aurelius wrote lines like, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." Notice what's missing, the word I. His gratitude wasn't self-centered. It anchored him to a web of contributions, farmers, teachers, ancestors, all invisible threads holding his life together. Entitlement thrives in isolation, convincing us our achievements are self-made. But Stoic gratitude shatters that myth. Consider a simple cup of coffee. Who planted the beans? Who built the ships that transported them? Who designed the mug in your hand? Suddenly, humility isn't about diminishing yourself. It's about seeing how small yet essential your stitch is in the grand tapestry. Here's your challenge today. Thank one person you've taken for granted, not with grand gestures but with specificity. The barista who remembers your order. Tell them how their consistency brightens your mornings. The colleague who quietly fixes shared documents. Name the exact time their diligence saved you stress. As Seneca reminded Lucilius, nothing is more honorable than a grateful heart. Not because it's polite, but because it rewires us to receive life as a gift rather than a debt owed. The irony, the more we acknowledge our dependence, the more powerfully we rise. Epictetus, despite his chains, taught kings. Marcus ruled an empire, yet thanked the critics who kept him sharp. Real strength begins when we stop keeping score of who deserves our appreciation and start seeing every interaction as a chance to honor the invisible forces that sustain us. Silence might seem passive in a world that rewards quick opinions and louder voices, but the Stoics saw it as an active discipline, one that requires more courage than speaking. Seneca drilled this into his students. Nature gave us one tongue but two ears, so we may hear twice as much as we speak. Zeno, founder of Stoicism, took it further, calling listening the apprenticeship of wisdom. Think about that. In an age where interrupting is almost a competitive sport, where we're trained to formulate responses while others talk, humility manifests in something radical, letting words land before crafting a reply. Modern conversation often resembles a game of verbal ping-pong, waiting for pauses to insert our take, subtly steering discussions back to our experiences. Studies show the average person interrupts within 17 seconds of another speaking. But Stoic listening isn't about politeness. It's about dismantling the ego's insistence that our perspective is the missing piece. Marcus Aurelius practiced this with his advisors, writing, "I learn nothing while talking. Every interruption is a theft from others, but also from myself." Here's the challenge for one day: treat every conversation as if you're mining for gold. Not the kind you pocket, but the kind that reshapes your understanding. When a colleague vents, resist the urge to top their story with yours. When a child rambles, don't rush to correct or conclude. Ask, what else, even once? The goal isn't to mute yourself indefinitely, but to notice how often you speak from habit rather than necessity. Social media amplifies this struggle. We scroll through comments hunting for openings to assert our views, mistaking reaction for connection. Yet Epictetus, who taught in crowded Athenian streets, warned, "You can't fill a cup that's already full." Active listening empties the cup not to discard your ideas, but to make space for something richer, the chance to be changed by another mind. Pay attention to the physical shift this requires. Your jaw might clench when you bite back an unsolicited solution. Your fingers might itch to type a rebuttal mid-conversation. That tension, it's the sound of humility muscles stretching. Because real listening isn't just hearing words, it's surrendering the illusion that you already know what someone needs to say. Try this tonight. Recall one conversation where you listened past your impulse to respond. Not to agree, just to absorb. Maybe you discovered a nuance in a friend's tone you'd have missed while preparing your counterargument. Or perhaps you heard your own assumptions echoed back, revealing gaps in your logic. The Stoics weren't preaching silence, they were offering a tool to turn dialogue into discovery. After all, if even Seneca, a famed orator, wrote, "Speech is the mirror of the soul, but silence is its polish," what might we uncover when we stop polishing our own reflections long enough to see others clearly? The most powerful humbling force in existence requires no philosophy books or lectures. It's etched into every sunrise, every heartbeat, every fading photograph. The Stoics called it Memento Mori, remember you must die, not as a dark obsession, but as a luminous reminder to live without delusion. Marcus Aurelius, who held more power than nearly any human in history, wrote this startling line in his private journal. Alexander the Great and his mule driver both ended up in the same place. Not to depress himself, but to strip away the pretense that status or wealth exempts anyone from life's ultimate democracy. Modern culture treats death like a glitch, something to delay with diets, deny with Botox, or drown out with endless distraction. Seneca saw this coming. It's not that we have too little time, he wrote, but that we waste so much of it. He wasn't scolding, he was pointing to the paradox. The more we avoid death's reality, the more we let life slip through our fingers like sand. Ancient Stoics practiced the opposite. They kept skulls on their desks, not to morbid, but to clarify. A farmer plants seeds differently when he knows frost is coming. Here's the twist: confronting mortality doesn't shrink your life, it expands your presence in it. Studies show people who reflect regularly on death make bolder choices, cherish relationships more deeply, and waste less energy on petty grievances. The very thing we fear becomes the compass pointing us toward what actually matters. Try this tonight, not as an exercise in gloom, but in liberation. If you knew this were your final year, what would you stop tolerating? Not grand bucket list items, but the subtle drains, the friendships kept out of obligation, the grudges rehearsed like old songs, the hours lost to screens when you craved connection. Epictetus offered a razor-sharp question. While you kiss your child good night, can you whisper to yourself, tomorrow you may die, not to borrow trouble, but to love without reservation? The emperors Marcus wrote about their palaces now ruins. Their names barely remembered serve as stark witnesses. Legacy isn't about what you build, but how you lived while building it. So let the certainty of an ending sharpen your beginnings, not with fear, but with the quiet urgency of someone who knows the clock is ticking and chooses moment by moment to make it count. Here's your next segment. A boiling pot doesn't know it's hot. It just overflows. That's how anger works in us. Marcus Aurelius had a strikingly simple method for diffusing it. When someone irritates you, ask yourself, what makes their behavior tolerable in a child? A toddler throwing food isn't malicious, they're learning. But somehow, when adults act thoughtlessly, we assume intent. The Stoics called this the arrogance of anger. The presumption that others should know better, do better, be better, while we grant ourselves endless grace for our own missteps. Epictetus, who endured a lifetime of others' cruelty, put it bluntly: when a dog barks, you don't take it personally. Apply the same logic to humans. Not because people are animals, but because their actions often stem from the same place: unexamined habits, unmet needs, unchallenged assumptions. The driver who cuts you off isn't targeting you, they're lost in their own urgency. The coworker who snaps likely carries burdens you can't see. This isn't about excusing harm, but about dissolving the ego's lie that every offense is about you. Modern psychology confirms this. Studies on attribution bias show we judge ourselves by our intentions. I was tired, but others by their actions. They were rude. The Stoic remedy: flip the script. Next time irritation flares, pause and ask, what if this person genuinely doesn't realize? Not as an invitation to tolerate abuse, but to drain the venom from the moment. Imagine holding up a mental photograph of them as a child, clumsy, scared, trying their best with the tools they have. Here's the paradox: the less personal you take others' behavior, the more power you reclaim to respond well. Seneca, who advised Nero, a man who famously lacked self-awareness, wrote, "Anger is brief insanity. Its fuel isn't the offense itself, but our refusal to accept that people like us are flawed works in progress." So try this now. Recall one recent frustration. Maybe a friend forgot your call, or a stranger was curt. Instead of replaying the sting, ask, what missing piece might explain this? Fatigue, a cultural difference, simple human error. You'll often find the heat fades when you stop fanning it with narratives of disrespect. Because humility in the face of others' faults isn't weakness, it's the quiet strength to keep your peace intact while the world around you rages. The world measures success in trophies and titles, but the Stoics measured it in something far rarer: the unshakable alignment between your actions and your deepest values. Epictetus, who watched students chase external validation, posed a radical question. If you fail while staying true to your principles, is that truly failure, or is succeeding through compromise the real loss? This wasn't hypothetical. When Roman politicians begged him for advice on climbing the social ladder, he'd reply, "First, prove you can't be corrupted on the way up." History remembers Julius Caesar's conquests, but Stoics revered Cato the Younger for how he lost. When civil war split Rome, Cato chose the doomed Republican side, not because he expected victory, but because surrendering to tyranny would have betrayed his soul. Plutarch recorded his final words before suicide: "I'd rather owe my life to justice than to Caesar's mercy." 2,000 years later, his defeat still teaches a piercing lesson. Some victories hollow you out, while certain defeats engrave your name on the bedrock of human dignity. Modern achievement culture thrives on a dangerous illusion that results justify the path, but Marcus Aurelius warned, "What doesn't benefit the hive doesn't benefit the bee." Every shortcut that erodes trust, every white lie that dims your integrity, every moment you trade authenticity for approval, these aren't stepping stones to success. They're slow leaks in your moral compass. Consider the entrepreneur who inflates numbers to secure funding, the student who cheats for a prestigious degree. Even the parent who badmouths another family to make their own child look better. These aren't just ethical slips, they're surrenders, the Stoic alternative. Judge your effort, not your ranking. Ask not, did I win, but did I honor what matters? Here's a challenge. Recall a time you faced a choice between principle and praise. Maybe you stayed silent when a joke crossed the line to fit in, or took credit for a team's idea to impress your boss. Now imagine a version of yourself who chose differently, not with grand defiance, but quiet conviction. That's the Stoic litmus test. When stripped of awards or applause, does the shape left behind still feel like you? Epictetus, born enslaved, knew this intimately. He taught that true freedom isn't control over your circumstances, but sovereignty over your character. While Caesar's empire turned to dust, Cato's refusal to bend became the torch that still lights the way for those who value who they become more than what they acquire. The question isn't whether you'll face these choices, it's whether you'll recognize them before the cost of winning becomes the person you promised yourself you'd never be. There's a peculiar tension in modern kindness where good deeds often feel incomplete until they're broadcasted, hashtagged, or featured in highlight reels. Seneca saw this trap 2 millennia ago when he wrote, "A benefit consists not in what is done, but in what is intentionally concealed." The Stoics practiced something radical for their time, and even more countercultural today: anonymous benefaction. Not generosity for clout, but virtue so quiet it leaves no fingerprints. Musonius Rufus took it further, calling unrecorded virtue the purest form of human excellence. Imagine that a world where the highest good wasn't measured in plaques or follower counts, but in deeds even the recipient couldn't trace back to you. Roman histories tell of wealthy Stoics who paid entire village debts under moonlit anonymity, or philosophers who left coins in the palms of sleeping beggars. Not as performance art, but as soul work, training themselves to divorce goodness from gratification. Modern charity often follows a different script. Viral donation videos, influencer philanthropy with branded t-shirts, even the subtle "I helped someone today" social media posts, they're not inherently wrong, but they risk feeding the ego more than the hungry. Studies reveal a startling pattern. People who publicize generosity experience a dopamine drop afterward, as if the external validation was the real nutrient. The Stoic alternative: let the act itself be the reward. Here's the challenge: sometime this week, perform one act of secret service. Not the kind you'll hint at later. Someone I know did something nice, but something truly untraceable. Pay for a stranger's groceries and slip away before they notice. Leave a book on a park bench with a note: for you, no strings. The discipline isn't in the giving, it's in resisting the itch to claim credit. There's a quiet alchemy in hidden kindness. When no one applauds, you're forced to sit with two truths: that you're capable of goodness without ego's fuel, and that the world is richer when gifts move through it like underground springs, unseen but sustaining everything above. Seneca put it plainly: what we do for applause is scaffolding. What we do in shadows becomes architecture. Build something that outlasts the moment, and you'll find humility isn't the absence of pride, it's the presence of something far more durable. Here's your next segment. Words can be cages we build for ourselves without realizing it. Consider how often we say, "That's just how I am," or "they'll never change." Epictetus spotted this trap centuries ago when he warned against dogmata, rigid declarations that lock us into fixed perspectives. His solution: speak like a Stoic, with doors left open for revision. Don't say "this is terrible," he taught, but "this is terrible for now." That tiny linguistic shift transforms absolutes into observations, leaving room for growth both in ourselves and others. Modern discourse thrives on extremes. You're either with us or against us. Social media algorithms reward certainty over curiosity, training us to speak in headlines rather than questions. But the Stoics practiced something radical: a linguistic humility. Marcus Aurelius constantly revised his own journal entries, scratching out firm judgments to reframe them as explorations. "I once thought, now I see," became his mental habit. This wasn't indecision, it was intellectual honesty in action. Try this experiment. Take one opinion you hold strongly, maybe about politics, parenting styles, or even a colleague's behavior. Now rewrite it 3 ways, each softer than the last. 1. They're completely irresponsible. 2. They've made choices I don't understand yet. 3. What might explain their actions that I haven't considered? Feel the difference. The first version slams a door. The third turns a mirror on your own assumptions. Epictetus took it further. First learn the meaning of what you say, then speak. Before declaring "this is unfair," ask "unfair by whose measure?" Before insisting "I can't handle this," probe "is that truly true, or am I overwhelmed in this moment?" Language shapes reality not by magic but by directing our attention. A courtroom lawyer doesn't ask "how fast was the car going?" but "how fast was the car going when it smashed into the other vehicle?" Verbs matter. The next time you catch yourself using always or never, pause. Those words are rarely factual, they're emotional shorthand for frustration. Replace them with often or sometimes and watch conflicts lose their sting. A partner who always forgets might frequently overlook details under stress. A boss who never listens may seem distracted during morning meetings. Nuance doesn't excuse poor behavior. It reveals the levers for actual change. Stoic speech isn't about watering down convictions, it's about precision. Seneca wrote letters filled with "perhaps," and it could be that, while standing firm on core principles. There's power in saying, "I don't know enough to decide," without fear of seeming weak. Because the strongest minds, like the sturdiest trees, bend without breaking, knowing rigidity isn't strength, but fragility in disguise. The comfort of our modern lives often disguises a paradox. By avoiding all discomfort, we might be weakening the very resilience we need when true hardship arrives. Seneca, who experienced both extreme wealth and exile, wrote letters urging his friend Lucilius to wrestle with poverty occasionally, not as punishment but as training. He'd deliberately wear threadbare clothes, eat simple meals, even sleep on the floor, not because he had to, but because he refused to let luxury become a necessity. In one striking passage, he warns, "Fortune has never taken anyone captive who was prepared for resistance. We've built a world where pain is treated like a system error, something to medicate, distract from, or optimize away." Thermostats maintain perfect temperatures, apps deliver groceries in minutes, algorithms feed us content that confirms our biases, but the Stoics recognized an uncomfortable truth: muscles atrophy without resistance, and so does character. Marcus Aurelius put it bluntly, the obstacle is the way, not that suffering is good in itself, but that our response to it determines whether we grow or shrink. Modern research echoes this. Studies on stress inoculation show that individuals who voluntarily endure manageable hardships, cold showers, fasting, even challenging conversations, develop greater emotional resilience than those who avoid all discomfort. It's not about masochism, it's about practicing the skill of adaptation before life forces your hand. Here's where Stoicism becomes shockingly practical. Try this for 7 days. Choose one modern convenience and intentionally interrupt it. Turn off notifications for an hour each morning. Take the stairs instead of the elevator. Have a conversation without checking your phone, not just putting it down, but leaving it in another room. The goal isn't to punish yourself, but to notice the mental itch of withdrawal and observe your capacity to tolerate it. Seneca's poverty drills weren't about self-denial, they were rehearsals for freedom. By proving to himself he could thrive with less, he shattered the illusion that happiness depended on external conditions. "He who has made himself indigent," he wrote, "has never been poor." There's a quiet confidence that comes from knowing you can handle discomfort, not because you've read about it, but because you've tested your limits in small, deliberate ways. The next time you feel the reflex to avoid something mildly unpleasant, a cold room, a difficult conversation, even boredom, pause. That moment of tension isn't a threat, it's an invitation to flex your Stoic muscles. As Marcus reminded himself, what stands in the way becomes the way. The warmth after cold, the clarity after struggle, the strength after resistance, these aren't just rewards. They're proof you're more adaptable than your comfort zone lets you believe. Criticism stings, that flash of heat when someone points out a flaw or suggests a better way. Most of us instinctively armor up, ready to defend or deflect, but the Stoics saw feedback differently, not as an attack to repel, but as a gift to unwrap carefully. Cato the Younger, the iron-willed senator even Julius Caesar couldn't corrupt, had a peculiar habit. When criticized in public, he'd thank the person aloud. Not as performative humility, but because he genuinely believed correction was rarer and more valuable than gold. Modern workplaces and social circles often operate on the opposite principle. We equate critique with personal failure, interpreting, "This could improve," as "you're not good enough." Epictetus, who endured both slavery and fame, identified the root of this pain. If someone handed you their body and said, "Do whatever you want with it," you'd be horrified. Yet you hand them your mind every time you let their words define you. His insight cuts to the core. Defensiveness isn't strength, it's surrendering your self-worth to others' fleeting opinions. Consider how differently we receive feedback based on the source. Praise from a stranger might lift us for hours, while constructive notes from a mentor can spiral into sleepless rumination. The Stoic remedy: treat all input like produce at a market inspected for value, keep what's nourishing and leave the rest without taking it personally. Marcus Aurelius journaled about this daily, writing reminders like, "It's possible to be both corrected and unshaken if I distinguish the observation from the observer's tone." Here's where ancient wisdom meets modern science. Psychological studies show that people who actively seek critical feedback, not just tolerate it, advance faster in careers and relationships. Why? Because they've decoupled evaluation from identity. A chef improving a recipe isn't insulting their skills, they're refining their craft. The same applies to every domain where growth matters. Try this experiment. Ask someone you trust for one piece of honest feedback, not vague praise, but actionable insight. Maybe a colleague notices you interrupt in meetings, or a friend observes you dismiss new ideas too quickly. Instead of explaining or justifying, practice Cato's discipline. Simply say, "Thank you for telling me," then reflect privately. The goal isn't to accept every critique as truth, but to train your reflexes to listen first, react never. Epictetus offered a razor-sharp question for moments when criticism burns. Would I rather be right or better? Every time we choose the former, we harden our limitations. But when we embrace the discomfort of growth, we honor the Stoic truth that humility isn't about shrinking, it's about expanding your capacity to learn, even from voices you'd rather not hear. After all, the oak tree doesn't resent the wind that tests its roots. It uses the tension to grow sturdier. Why should we? There's a profound freedom in holding things lightly, like cradling water in your palms rather than clenching it in a fist. Seneca captured this perfectly when he wrote, "Enjoy what you possess without becoming its prisoner." At first glance, it sounds simple, but peel back the layers and you'll find a radical challenge to modern materialism. The Stoics weren't against owning things, they warned against letting those things own you. Consider how often we conflate possessions with identity. "I'm the person with the luxury car," or "my worth is tied to this job title." Epictetus, who owned little more than a wooden cup and famously broke it to test his detachment, posed a piercing question. When you kiss your child goodnight, do you whisper this is borrowed? Not to cheapen love, but to underscore that even the most precious things in life are transient. The house you live in, the body you inhabit, the relationships you cherish, none are truly yours in the eternal sense. They're on loan from fate. Modern consumer culture thrives on the opposite illusion. Advertisers don't sell products, they sell identities. Buy this watch to be successful. Own this bag to become sophisticated. But Stoic joy comes from appreciating things without needing them to define you. Picture a traveler in a beautiful hotel. They admire the art, sleep soundly in the bed, yet never mistake the suite for their permanent home. That's the mindset Seneca advocated, savoring life's gifts while remembering they aren't the source of your worth. Here's a practice to expose this distinction. Grab a pen and list 5 things you instinctively call mine: your car, your career, even your talents. Now rewrite each one as currently in my care. Feel the shift. The car becomes a tool for movement rather than a status symbol. Your job transforms from an identity into an activity. This isn't wordplay, it's mental restructuring, the irony. Detachment doesn't diminish enjoyment, it deepens it. When you stop clinging to things as extensions of yourself, you're free to appreciate them purely. A Stoic sips fine wine not to post about it, but to marvel at the centuries of human ingenuity in every drop. They wear a well-made coat not as armor against judgment, but as gratitude for the craftsman's skill. Ownership without attachment isn't deprivation. It's the art of enjoying life's banquet without fearing the eventual empty plate. So tonight, try this. Hold something you love, a favorite book, a family heirloom, and silently acknowledge, this isn't me. It's just passing through my hands. The warmth won't fade, but the fear of losing it, that just might. Here's your next segment. Wisdom often wears the disguise of ignorance. The Stoics practiced something radical: intentional foolishness, not as a joke but as training against intellectual pride. Musonius Rufus, the teacher who shaped Epictetus, urged his students, better to appear uninformed and learn than to pretend knowledge and remain ignorant. That's the essence of playing the fool, a deliberate humbling of the ego to create space for genuine growth. History's greatest minds used this technique. Socrates built his entire philosophy on declaring, "I know that I know nothing," not as false modesty, but as a weapon against certainty's blindness. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, would ask childlike questions in debates, but why? Repeated until his opponents stumbled upon contradictions in their own arguments. Even the sharpest blades grow dull without the whetstone of curiosity. Modern expertise culture pushes us toward the opposite tendency, to nod along when we don't understand, to bluff rather than admit gaps. But consider how much richer conversations become when someone finally asks the simple question everyone was avoiding. The meeting where one voice says, "Can we back up? I'm lost at step 3. That's not weakness, it's the friction that sparks collective clarity. Try this today. Find one opportunity to ask a question that makes you slightly uncomfortable. Not performative, "I'm so silly" disclaimers, but genuine inquiries from a place of openness. How does this machine actually work? Can you explain that concept like I'm 5? Watch for 2 reactions: the relief in others who also didn't know, and the subtle expansion in your own understanding when pretense falls away. There's a hidden superpower in playing the fool skillfully. The executive who admits, "I need help with this spreadsheet," earns trust faster than the one who hides incompetence behind jargon. The parent who says, "I don't know, let's find out together," teaches resilience better than one who fabricates answers. Like a tree bending in wind to avoid breaking, temporary vulnerability often breeds lasting strength. Epictetus, who endured both slavery and fame, left this paradox: if you wish to be wise, begin by admitting you are not. That admission isn't an endpoint, it's the threshold where real learning begins. So next time pride whispers, "You should know this," reply with the Stoic's secret weapon: the courage to not know and the wisdom to ask anyway. We live in an age that celebrates the self-made individual, the lone genius, the solitary entrepreneur, the independent spirit. Yet ancient Stoics saw something most of us overlook: there's no such thing as a truly separate self. Marcus Aurelius captured this beautifully when he wrote, "What doesn't benefit the hive doesn't benefit the bee." His words cut to the core of Stoic cosmology, an understanding that humans thrive not in isolation, but as part of an intricate web of mutual dependence. Hierocles, a lesser-known Stoic thinker, gave us a practical tool to visualize this. Imagine concentric circles. At the center, you. The next ring holds family, then friends, community, nation, and finally all humanity. Modern life often shrinks our focus to that innermost circle, but Hierocles argued that wisdom lies in consciously drawing those outer rings closer, not through grand gestures but daily acts of recognition. The barista who crafts your coffee, the farmer who grew those beans, even the ancestors whose labor built the roads you travel, all are threads in the same living fabric. The irony: individualism promises freedom but often delivers loneliness. Studies show people who see themselves as part of something larger report greater life satisfaction, even during hardship. The Stoic antidote to modern alienation isn't self-erasure, it's reconnection. When Seneca wrote, "No one can live happily who has regard for himself alone," he wasn't preaching sacrifice, he was pointing to a deeper truth: our well-being is literally woven into the well-being of others. Here's your challenge: before this week ends, extend one act of deliberate care to someone outside your usual circles. Not a friend who's like family, but a stranger or distant acquaintance. Pay for the next person's toll at the bridge. Leave a handwritten note of encouragement in a library book for a future reader. Tutor a student from a different background. The goal isn't to fix anything, it's to tangibly experience what the Stoics knew. that every time we widen our circle of concern, we don't diminish ourselves. We become more fully human because humility, in the Stoic sense, isn't about thinking less of yourself. It's about recognizing how profoundly you belong to something far greater and acting accordingly. As Marcus reminded himself in the dead of night, we were born to work together like feet, hands, and eyelids. No one praises a foot for carrying its own weight. The miracle is in how it moves unseen, unthanked, utterly essential in concert with the whole. Few virtues are as disarming or as secretly powerful as the ability to laugh at yourself. Seneca, who advised emperors and faced exile, wrote that self-deprecating humor was the antidote to vanity's poison. Not the bitter sarcasm that cuts others down, but the warm wit that gently exposes your own flaws first. Ancient Stoics saw this as a social superpower. When you openly chuckle at your missteps, you drain tension from a room and give others permission to breathe. Epictetus took it further with a challenge. If someone told you that others mocked you behind your back, wouldn't you want to know exactly what they said so you could laugh at it too? That inversion, turning shame into shared amusement, reveals a profound truth. The more seriously we take ourselves, the more ammunition we give critics. Modern mockery often weaponizes flaws, but Stoic humor disarms by embracing them first. Consider the difference between two speakers. One stumbles on stage and glares at the audience, blaming the flaw. Another trips, then quips, "Well, that wasn't in the script." The first clings to an illusion of perfection. The second proves no stumble can topple their worth. Here's where practice meets principle. Try sharing an embarrassing story unprompted this week, not for sympathy, but for the sheer joy of deflating ego's grip. Maybe it's the time you waved enthusiastically at a stranger who looked nothing like your friend, or when you confidently quoted Shakespeare only to learn it was from a cereal box. Watch how quickly walls crumble when you lead with, "Let me tell you how I messed up," because Stoic humor isn't about humiliation. It's about liberation from the exhausting facade of flawlessness, from the fear of others' opinions, from the weight of pretending. As Seneca reminded Lucilius, he who laughs at himself is never without laughter's protection. And in a world obsessed with curating perfect images, that might be the most rebellious kind of freedom. There's a reason humility runs like a golden thread through every Stoic teaching, because without it, courage becomes recklessness, wisdom turns to arrogance, and discipline devolves into rigidity. Think of it as the silent conductor that orchestrates all other virtues into harmony. Over these past sections, we've explored how humility isn't about self-deprecation, but clear-eyed self-awareness, recognizing the limits of your control, mining failures for wisdom, and finding joy in contributions that never make the highlight reels. Epictetus, who spent his youth in chains, left us a piercing definition of education that most modern schools ignore. First, learn the meaning of what you say, then speak. True learning isn't accumulating knowledge, but unlearning the arrogance that makes us think we already know. That's the heart of Stoic humility, not adding more to your mental library, but emptying the cup of assumptions so you can truly receive. Here's your invitation. Choose one exercise from our time together to practice this week. Maybe it's the evening reflection where you name a flaw without judgment, or the secret act of service you'll never disclose. Perhaps it's simply asking, "Could I be wrong?" in a conversation where you typically dig in. Growth doesn't demand grand gestures, just consistent, quiet returns to what matters. If this countercultural approach to strength resonates with you, there's more where it came from. Consider joining our community of modern Stoics, not as experts, but as fellow travelers committed to peeling back layers of illusion, one humble step at a time. Because in a world that screams for attention, the real rebellion is cultivating the quiet confidence to listen, learn, and serve, even when no one's watching.